It is January 15th, 2025, and I have a bone to pick with every member of the Biden administration, namely Tony Blinken, and every member of the mainstream media here in this country who have waited until we were on the brink of a ceasefire and hostage release deal between Israel and Hamas to suddenly come out and start calling out Israel or admitting even a fraction of the hell on earth that the Palestinians have been living under in the Gaza Strip for the last 15 months. Yes, I'm talking about Blinken's recent speech before the Atlantic Council, where he suddenly wanted to start talking about the reality of the fact that Hamas has recruited, as he said, almost as many militants as they have lost during 15 months of the Israeli blockade and bombardment that was fully supported by the US. I'm talking about CBS and their new 60 Minutes report, in which they're suddenly releasing footage from the Gaza Strip that they filmed back in May 2024. 8 months ago, they knew exactly how horrific the conditions were there, and yet they waited until the end of the Biden administration and until we were at a point where we are now looking at a full deal that Israel and Hamas have agreed to. We are going to be getting into all of the latest, but first, just a quick note that if you are watching this video on YouTube, please make sure that you are following me on an alternative channel, whether that be my channel over on Rumble or my page on Substack. And if you want to support my work and if you're interested in exclusive weekly content, you can find it all over on my pages on Substack and Patreon, and I'll leave all of that information in the description box below. All right, let's get into it. And how convenient it is that now, after 15 months of genocide, 15 months of our Secretary of State Antony Blinken taking trips back and forth to Israel, all of a sudden now he wants to start coming out and being anywhere close to honest or critical of Israel in a way that we have not seen during his entire time in office. But before we get into the farewell speech that he gave to the Atlantic Council, I want to just take a moment for the protesters who decided that they would get involved with his speech.
Bloody Blinken, Secretary of Genocide, you have the blood of hundreds of thousands of innocent people on your hands. We have spent a year.
I respect your views. Please allow me to share.
Trying to appeal to your humanity.
Bloody Blinken's Secretary of Genocide. That really does sum it up, doesn't it? I mean, even though Blinken has been in office for the last 4 years, the entirety of the Biden administration, he will forever be known for the work that he has done, for the role that he has played in the U.S. enabling genocide of the Palestinian people in the Gaza Strip. And yet, despite the fact that Israel has claimed this entire time that they are just trying to defeat Hamas, what did we see from Blinken? Oh, well, we saw him stand up in front of the world, essentially, and say that there is no way for Hamas to be defeated militarily.
We've long made the point to the Israeli government that Hamas cannot be defeated by a military campaign alone, that without a clear alternative, a post-conflict plan, and a credible political horizon for the Palestinians, Hamas, or something just as abhorrent and dangerous, will grow back.
Great. So if you knew that the entire time, then why was the U.S. continuing to send Israel 2,000-pound bombs and whatever other weapons and so-called lethal aid they could come up with when they knew exactly where those bombs were going? Because as a reminder, we've known for months now that the overwhelming majority of Palestinians killed by Israel's attacks are women and children. And that's not even accounting for all of the indirect deaths, all of the civilians who have starved to death or who die because they don't have access to medical care. And yet, here Blinken is now admitting that the result of this 15-month genocidal blockade and bombardment of the Gaza Strip is that, as he put it, Hamas has recruited almost as many militants as they have lost.
That's exactly what's happened in northern Gaza since October 7th. Each time Israel completes its military operations and pulls back, Hamas militants regroup and reemerge, because there's nothing else to fill the void. Indeed, we assess that Hamas has recruited almost as many new militants as it has lost. That is a recipe for an enduring insurgency and perpetual war.
And it's that last sentence, that this is a recipe for perpetual war, that really stands out to me, because it's a reminder that Israel knew this all along. The goal was never actually to defeat Hamas. The goal is ethnic cleansing of the Gaza Strip. That's why you've seen Israel completely destroy the Gaza Strip and make it unlivable. The goal has been to target the Palestinian population, not just because it means that there's less of a population for Israel to deal with, but also because it means that the more that you target the population, the more support there is going to be for the resistance. And for as long as there is a resistance, then there is an enemy for Israel to continue to fight. And there is an excuse for them to continue on with this war for as long as they want to. And I know that Blinken knows this. It's just interesting to see him taking a little bit of a break from the "but October 7th" rhetoric to then admit that the US and Israel have been the most successful recruiting tools for Hamas, the same group that Israel claimed that it was actively going to defeat. Now, another admission that we got from Blinken that I thought was interesting was just a fraction of what Israel has also been doing to the Palestinians in the West Bank.
In the West Bank, Israel is expanding official settlements and nationalizing land at a faster clip than any time in the last decade, while turning a blind eye to unprecedented growth in illegal outposts. Violent attacks by extremist settlers against Palestinian civilians have reached record levels.
And that's because the US is enabling it. I mean, if Israel is getting away with an all-out genocide over in the Gaza Strip, then what's to stop them from terrorizing Palestinians in the West Bank and actively stealing their land? And not only that, but it was just this week that Israel and the Palestinian Authority agreed to release $500 million in Palestinian tax revenues only because it's being used to pay for electricity and fuel supplied by Israel. But the fact that Israel decided it would arbitrarily withhold tax revenue collected by the Palestinian Authority back in October 2023, and it is still refusing to release those funds, is just insane. So insane that it even made it into Blinken's speech.
Israel's government has systematically undermined the capacity and legitimacy of the only viable alternative to Hamas, the Palestinian Authority. Consider funding. Israel continues to hold back PA tax revenues that it collects on behalf of the Palestinians, funds that belong to the Palestinians and that the PA needs to pay people who provide essential services like healthcare and security in the West Bank, which is vital to Israel's own security.
Now, I do have a long list of criticisms of the Palestinian Authority, and I think it's important to note here that the only reason that Blinken is promoting the PA whatsoever is because the US and Israel know that they are capable of controlling this group, which is also a reminder that that's not even good enough for Israel anymore. In fact, Israel has gone on such a power trip in the last 15 months that Netanyahu has made his entire personality claiming he is the only person who can prevent a unified Palestinian state. And what does that tell you? When it would be all too easy for Israel to just play the game, allow the presence of a quote-unquote Palestinian state that they know that they can fully control just to kind of appease everyone and especially appease the region. Well, they've gotten to have their genocidal fun under the Biden administration, getting away with really whatever they want to, as the rest of the world has done absolutely nothing. And now we have the incoming Trump administration. But the Trump administration does not want the loud and proud version of genocide that the Biden administration has allowed. Now, Trump has made it very clear that he would prefer a much more quiet genocide, right? He doesn't want there to be all of the bad publicity for Israel with all of the massacres it's carrying out targeting Palestinian civilians. So that's why I think that you're seeing this sudden push and why you're even seeing this announcement of a deal between Israel and Hamas that will allow for at least a temporary ceasefire and hostage exchange, is because they know that Trump is on the other side of it and he wants to push for normalization. And Blinken more or less admitted this during his farewell speech at the Atlantic Council, where he noted that the more that Israel continues to massacre Palestinians, I'll say, the more that they are isolated on the international stage and the harder it is to pursue normalization in the region.
The suffering of civilians in Gaza is a tragedy in its own right. It's also isolated Israel internationally and imperiled its hard-earned strides toward building relationships in the region. The longer the humanitarian crisis in Gaza goes on, the more Arab countries that recently normalized relations with Israel will face pressure from their populations to walk away.
And notice there how he says the populations, because Israel's not worried about the Saudi government or really other regional governments who have sat by and done absolutely nothing over the course of 15 months of genocide. No, they're worried about the populations in the regional countries, the people rising up and targeting the regional governments who, again, are doing nothing whatsoever because they don't care that Israel is committing genocide against the Palestinians. And it's so telling to me, right? It comes back to this information war that we are currently in, and the fact that you have networks here in the US like CBS News. They are a perfect example. They released a 60 Minutes report last weekend in which they detailed the horrific reality of life in the Gaza Strip. They talked about the pressure that diplomats have been under from the US government and the ways in which the Biden administration has actively silenced reports from coming forward showing what Israel is doing in Gaza. Oh, but they also released footage that they filmed back in May 2024, which tells us that they literally waited 8 months to release that footage, to let the public know what was happening in the Gaza Strip, or how many US-made bombs were littering the ground all around and were playing a role in everyday lives of the Palestinian civilians. They waited for 8 months. And what was CBS doing during that time? Well, they were apparently busy with other projects, at least one of which included a full-on report and an interview with a member of Mossad, where that member bragged about the literal terrorist attack that Israel carried out targeting the civilians of Lebanon. And it was presented by CBS in this way of saying, oh, look how dangerous, how all-powerful Mossad is. They can target anyone, anywhere, at any time. And not once did they decide to mention the footage that they had collected months earlier of the genocide that Israel was carrying out just next door. It's yet another reminder that you don't have to look far to find overwhelming hypocrisy coming from members of the mainstream media or members of the US government, especially when it comes to those individuals who are now suddenly speaking out, now suddenly talking about Israel's war crimes or the horrific reality of life in Gaza for the Palestinian people. And these individuals are acting as if they just found out about it when they have known the truth all along. And that tells you everything that you need to know, that they waited months. They waited until the end of the Biden administration. They waited until we were on the brink of a ceasefire deal to come out and to speak up publicly about what the US was supporting the entire time. And that's something everyone should be talking about. If anything in this video resonated with you, be sure to like it, share it with your friends, leave a comment, and as always, don't forget to subscribe. And if you want to keep up with all of my work, make sure that you're subscribed to my page on Substack. That's rachelblevins.substack.com. That's where you'll find ad-free videos and new weekly episodes of my exclusive series for paid subscribers called Sanction. You can also check out Sanction over on my page on Patreon. That's patreon.com/rachelblevins. As always, thank y'all so much for all of your support, and I'll see you next time.